Hello, I'm Darryl Rouson, your state senator from Hillsborough and Pinellas counties, and you're watching Tampa Bay Community Network.
Hi, I'm Bill Hodges, and this is Spotlight on Government. And you're going to enjoy the guest I have today. Last time he came here was a member of the House of Representatives. Now he's a state senator from District 19, Darryl Rouson. Darryl, pleased to have you on the program.
Bill, thank you for having me, and thank you for what you do for our community in terms of giving out good information.
Big difference between being a representative and a senator. They tell me the restrooms are much nicer in the Senate side. Is that true?
Well, I don't know whether the restrooms are nicer. Certainly the offices are
better.
But also the level of respect. You know, when you're one of 40 as opposed to being one of 120.
That does make a difference, yeah.
Yeah, and especially if you're in the minority party, it makes a difference.
I imagine that does make a difference.
Well, my last 2 years in the House, it was 81 Republicans and 39 Democrats, and it made it very difficult for a Democrat to stand strong on principle, on policy, trying to push things that were consistent and important to his district and to his or her constituents that elected him or her. So it's a learning process.
You know, that's something that I've been thinking about in this state, and I've never had anybody really explain it to me. I understand there is more Democrats registered than Republican. Is it the gerrymandering or whatever that keeps the numbers of the Democratic Party down, or just don't Democrats vote?
Well, there's some blame to be put on the drawing of districts. In fact, I and many others would like to see districts that are not drawn by politically swayed legislators, but by independent commissions who can be objective and impartial in the drawing of the district.
I remember your House district was strung together by telephone lines and bridges. It was so long and thin.
Yes, it was.
In 2 counties, at least 2, well, maybe 3.
In the House, I represented 4 counties, North Manatee, North Sarasota, Southern Hillsborough, and Southern Pinellas County. And I was the only state representative that had the Skyway Bridge in his district. In fact, we tried to register those fish underneath the vote, but they wouldn't hold still. In the Senate, I represent portions of 2 counties, Hillsborough and Pinellas. And it's a very diverse, very large district.
Let's go back and look at Darryl Rouson. You're an attorney. Where were you born? Are you a native Floridian, or did you come from somewhere else like so many of us did?
Well, I'm a transplant, if you will, but I consider myself...
Now, don't tell me about being born under a rock in Czechoslovakia.
We were teasing about that before the show. I was born in New Orleans. I'm a charity hospital baby. It's now closed because of Katrina.
Was that the one that had so many awful things happen?
Yes.
Oh, yeah,
yes,
that
right,
was
right
terrible.
Downtown New Orleans.
Yeah.
My parents moved to St. Pete, Tampa. My dad was in the Air Force. He was stationed at MacDill for a little while, and he liked the Tampa Bay area, and we stayed in St. Pete. So from 5 years old, I was raised in St. Petersburg, graduate of Bishop Barry High School. It's now called St. Pete Catholic. I'm still mad they let the girls in after I graduated. And then I went to Xavier in New Orleans.
You think that was bad? The Air Force is now cohabitating in the barracks.
Oh, goodness.
We had to sneak them in the fire escape.
Oh, better not say that on the air. Then after Xavier University in New Orleans, I went to University of Florida for law school, and then came back to St. Pete to practice law.
And you've been practicing law ever since?
Yes, I've been involved in community service and in politics for a little while now. I ran for president of the NAACP in 2000, stayed in the presidency of that community organization for 5 years. Then I stepped down to run for the State House. served 4 terms or 8 years, termed out, and then decided to run for the state senate.
How do you feel about term limits? I'm not in favor of term limits.
Well,
How do you feel about
I was a fan of term limits before I got elected. Now, once elected, I understand what seniority means. I understand what experience means. I understand what know-how means that comes with time and education about the process. If you've never served in a legislative body or in a state legislative body before, it can be quite an experience to learn where the appropriations suite is, where the chairman set up their offices, how to work with staff in order to get things done, how even to work with agencies of government in order to get things done. Once you've learned all that, you're on your way out the door. So, you know, I'm not the biggest fan of term limits anymore.
Well, I look at a corporation and I say, if you went into any corporation, you said, you've got 8 years and you're done. You have to leave at the end of 8 years. I'm thinking, there wouldn't be a lot of transition there. It wouldn't work well. And I don't understand how it works any better in government.
I don't either. I do believe now that we should reconsider the whole concept of term limits.
I thought the ballot box was term limits.
The ballot box should be the term limit. If you're doing a good job and you're serving the people and your heart is in the right place and you're being effective, then why should you have to go home at the end of 8 years?
With that. You've got a new challenge now. We're going on into the Senate, a whole new 8 years, if you will. What are some of the things you think are the most important things facing the state of Florida and things that you might have some impact on?
Well, the economy has gotten better. We still need more jobs. We still need economic development in certain communities that are hurting. We still need to do something about education. As you know, the Tampa Bay Times won the Pulitzer Prize last year for their expose article on the 5 challenged schools, the failing schools that the paper called it. I refer to them as challenged schools, and all schools have some challenges. There's still a lot to do in terms of criminal justice reform. We have returning inmates coming back to Hillsborough County and Pinellas County in the thousands.
Any idea what the recidivism rate is?
Well, they estimate it's about 33%. About 1/3 of those released will recidivate. But we can work on that. We can cut that down. We can have reentry programs. We can have skills training and development, job development. We can deal with housing in the event they can't rent because they have a felony conviction. There are things that we can do to cut down on the recidivism rate. While we have their bodies locked up, we ought to lock up their minds and hearts at the same time. That means programming. That means giving them tools that they can work with when they come from behind the walls. And it's a matter of public safety. Our communities are safer if they don't recidivate.
I can't agree with you more, and I don't understand why more people don't see this. You've got people locked up, many of them quite bright, who could be teachers in there. And if you want to talk about good time, if you go to classes and you pass the test, you get good time. Instead of spending your time lifting weights and getting strong enough to be able to intimidate the guards.
Right. Well,
rather see them lifting pencils and learning how to write.
You make a good point, and I'm excited that Senator Dennis Baxley and I worked on a bill a couple of years ago to create more faith-based prisons. And at one of our prisons now, the New Orleans Baptist Theological Seminary actually has a seminary behind the walls.
Really?
To engage the inmates in spiritual direction and spiritual guidance.
I understand faith-based, and I've seen it. It's worked. We had a faith-based prison right here in Hillsborough County for the ladies, and they shut it down for whatever reason, economically or what all. And it was working. People were going through and getting out and going to do good things. But is faith-based the only avenue there, or is there other avenues that are more secular?
Well, there are other avenues, such as drug treatment. What a novel concept. If someone's been arrested for drug possession or drug usage, or they're an addict and they committed a crime to feed their habits, then why not get them treatment instead of just pure incarceration? And treatment could be behind the walls as well as before you get to the walls through things like drug court. So instead of incarceration, they're deferred to treatment to handle the problem for which they committed the crime in the first place.
My wife and I were just talking about this. We were talking about somebody who just got an 18-year prison sentence for vehicular homicide. They were drunk. They ran over somebody. Now that person's going to spend 18 years on the taxpayer's tab, being warehoused in some jail somewhere.
Right. Instead of dealing with the alcoholism or the abuse of alcohol.
I mean, it's serious, I grant you. They killed somebody, but why not make them take that drug that they can't drink with?
Anti-abuse?
Yeah, whatever it is, make them take that every morning and then go out and work somewhere and give money to the family of the people they killed the person on, instead of 18 years learning to be a bigger criminal.
Well, you know, society exacts consequences for behaviors. We don't want people committing serious crimes. We don't want them committing crimes at all. But we have to continue to work on that.
I would fully believe it. Juveniles. I know that's something that's near and dear to your heart. The situation with the way children are being treated in our courts by our prosecutors. What do you think can be improved there?
Well, two things. One is we want to push a little further juvenile citation. We were able to pass a bill that allows some discretion on the part of the police officers to cite a juvenile as opposed to arresting a juvenile. But we need to do a little more, and some community organizations are calling it mandatory. We should make it mandatory civil citation instead of arresting.
Okay.
Secondly, direct filing. Some states' attorneys abuse the process, I would assert, and direct file disproportionately juveniles into adult court or into felony court for serious violations. A juvenile's brain is consistently in the process of development, and they make some stupid mistakes of judgment. Doesn't make them a criminal, and many times it shouldn't mean that they're prosecuted in adult court.
Boy, do I agree with you there.
Now, some states' attorneys, to their credit, will say that adult court offers more options in terms of sentencing as opposed to juvenile court.
Oh, really?
Well, they say that, they argue that, but the juvenile court judge has some options too, and the kid is not in the adult system.
But what you say makes so much sense. I remember I grew up in the southeast side of Detroit. It's a pretty rough neighborhood, and three of my best friends, one died in a bank robbery, one died in of a drug overdose, and the other died in Jackson Prison doing life. And I got moved out of there. My family moved in time. But I could have easily been there with any one of them, making stupid decisions like that. And young people do that.
They do.
I think we have to have some way of looking at it and saying, is this a stupid decision, or does this kid really mean?
I think you're exactly right, which is why this year Senator Bobby Powell and myself will be filing a bill that deals with judicial review of a decision to direct file, to try to bring some balance to the process. Now, not every state attorney is abusing it, but we want some balance brought to the process.
It'll be interesting to see our new state attorney, how he approaches these things.
Yeah, it will be.
Have you had a chance to sit down and talk with him yet?
We've talked in passing. He was very passionate. I was on the campaign trail with him. I'm anxious to see where he lands.
I guess one of the things that bothers me too is that we elect judges to use their best judgment, and then we put things like mandatory sentencing on them. That isn't best judgment. That's saying everybody gets the same thing.
Well, and I understand the initial reason why we did that. There seemed to be disparity in sentencing. There seemed to be this pay-to-play type of situation where if you had a well-heeled lawyer with silk stockings and the trappings.
Was that the reason for it? I never realized what that reason was.
Some folks felt like your lawyer, with his connections, got you a better deal with the judge.
Well, there's probably some good argument to be made for that.
Well, I believe the judges were good men and women who labored with their decisions based on the facts that was presented to them. But there was this feeling that disparity of sentencing was occurring freely. So guidelines were put into place to try to bring some uniformity, to try to bring some objectivity to a sentence. We think that's hurt us in some respects. It's taken away the discretion of the judge to think and to craft.
And that's why we put them there.
That's what we put them there for, to think and craft a sentencing decision based on the facts and the individual in front of him. And we've tied judges' hands to a large extent. You know, I stand for good law and order, good law enforcement, but sometimes discretion and mercy play in the temperament of justice.
There's a Greek philosopher who made the statement about 500 years before Christ. The law is like a spider web. The fly is caught, the elephant passes through. And it could well apply to what you just were talking about. If you have a really great attorney and you have all the connections, you pass on through.
Right.
So maybe the mandatory sentencing, there is an upside to it.
Well,
but I've always been bothered by it.
That was the argument until the drug cases started coming along. And we've packed our prisons with nonviolent offenders, drug possessors, and things like that, when we should be packing it with violent offenders and real criminals.
I'm a taxpayer. I don't want to warehouse these people. There's got to be a better way to do it. You know, rarely do you hear somebody smoking a joint and then saying, well, I'm going to beat up on my kids and my wife. It doesn't happen. Booze, yeah, different story. Yeah. But to criminalize all the marijuana things and to put these kids, and many of them are young, and many of them are from disadvantaged neighborhoods, put them into prison for it makes no sense to me.
Well, we're looking at those things. We're going to be studying those in the legislature.
Have you looked at Colorado? Is there an increase in usage, an increase in problems, or anything of that nature?
Well, there's some studies that say there was no increase in recreational use or in use by youth in those jurisdictions, but it's still new. The national news ran a story just a couple of nights ago that the research that we've done has been insufficient and is inadequate, and we need to do more. We really don't fully understand all of the effect and impact of recreational marijuana. We know that it affects the developing brain in juveniles, but we just have not studied it like we should have.
I'd like to do a whole program on the criminal justice system from the Senate side. We can have you back if you'll come back.
I'd love to come back.
We'll talk about that the whole way. There are some other things, TBX, I'd like to talk about that. And the highway situation and what's going on with it. Is it dead now, or is it
It's not dead. It's what Secretary Boxhold said. They pushed the reset button. In Tampa Bay, anyone who lives here knows that we need solutions to traffic congestion and transportation problems. We need that. This is why the ferry boat was launched recently. This is why we're widening lanes on interstates and highways. This is why the airport is expanding. We need light rail. We need more trolleys. We need solutions to the traffic congestion and the transportation problems that people are experiencing. Folks need to be able to get to work through mass transit. And there are a lot of things that we need to do. TBX is something that should be done, but it must be done, if at all, with the inclusion of the community.
Because we were going to wipe out some communities with it.
Yeah, and you know, some folks are worried. Gentrification. You know, they'll be moved out, then can't afford to move back in.
Right, yes.
You know, but the Department of Transportation has not done the greatest job of selling the benefits of TBX.
Well, many of us looked at it as Mercedes lanes.
Mercedes lanes.
You know,
yeah.
Those that have got the extra bucks to pay for it every day coming back and forth
Yeah.
to work, so they didn't have to slow down, are going to benefit.
Well, I'm glad that it's stalled right now because the reset button needed to be pushed. But we must find a way to be inclusive of the community's feelings, the community's problems, and the things that this will affect in our community.
It's interesting when you talk about community feelings. This is such a diverse community as far as economics and a variety of other things, even locations. It's really hard, isn't it, to get your arm around what the community thinks?
Well, it's not really.
No?
I consider myself a Bay Area senator. I'm not just a senator from St. Petersburg or just a senator from Tampa. The reason why my district includes 2 counties is because 2 counties, some of them have similar problems, similar situations and conditions. And what we need to do is find solutions to these things by working together. Ybor City, in my district, has its issues. Brandon, Riverview, and Apollo Beach, in my district, has its transportation and economic development issues and growth issues. East Tampa and the CDCs that service it. You know,
boy, those are really diverse areas.
very
you just
diverse.
mentioned.
Yeah, Midtown in St. Petersburg, Lakewood Estates. You know, each area has its problems. Some are similar. And we should not be divided by a bridge in 20 minutes on solutions to these issues.
I really think we should look more diligently at light rail. What are you seeing in the committees you're in and talking about it? Is light rail anything they're really, I go to Atlanta, I don't rent a car, I get on the rail. I go to any San Francisco, wherever I go, I get on the rail. Even Cleveland, I get on the rail.
Well, we should have some light rail, and it should be built and positioned appropriately and in proper areas that help people.
I'm thinking from the airport down to the port.
Well, we need light rail, and we need to work on those things.
What do you see as, when you look at the area, Brandon, with those people in Tampa, we don't want to do that. There's so much, I can't think of the word I want right now, but territorialism, if nothing else. Getting those people working together, what's it going to take?
It's going to take a steady effort. It's going to take a determined mind to create unity amongst the communities. You know, I said it the other night when I spoke at a church here in Tampa. On Monday morning of the King holiday, 1,100 people gathered to listen to the National Board Chair of the NAACP, Rosalind Brock, deliver a wonderful and stirring message of the King legacy to 1,100 people in the Coliseum. And any politician who was anybody in Pinellas County was there. Corporations were there, churches were there, the community was there. Yet a bridge, and 20 minutes away, another 1,100 people gathered to hear a stirring message by the great Reverend Dr. Otis Moss, who was a friend of King, talk about his legacy. And any politician who was anybody in Hillsborough County was there, as well as corporate leaders and community leaders. And I've often remarked, well,
So we get a big tent.
a big tent or a big convention center and pull those folks together, and for the sake of unity, have one breakfast and pack it with 3,000 to 4,000 people to hear a message of King's legacy. And wouldn't that be a great accomplishment and a great statement to our community?
Oh, I think it'd be wonderful if they could do that. Now you got to get it to decide whether we're going to have it in St. Pete or we're going to have it in Tampa.
Well, we have it in both.
Well, but if we're going to have one.
Alternate.
Oh, okay, alternate. Good thought.
Dr. King said, through technology and technological advances, particularly the jet engine, you can take off from Los Angeles, and if you develop hiccups, you can hick in Los Angeles and cup in New York. And he said, because of that, we have made the world a neighborhood. Now we're challenged to make it a brotherhood. So the Tampa Bay area is one neighborhood. How do we make it a brotherhood?
I think good people trying to work together.
Consistently and firmly convicted for the outcome.
That is really,
unity.
Yeah, without a doubt. I promise you, we're running down on time, but I promise you a minute or two to be able to talk directly to the people that got you elected so you could tell them thank you, and to assure the other ones that didn't vote for you and made that mistake that you're still going to take care of them too. So would you like to do that?
Thank you. And I want to thank the voters of Tampa Bay, the ones in Brandon, Riverview, and Apollo Beach, the ones in Ybor City, East Tampa, College Hill, Sulphur Springs, Robles Park, for voting for me, particularly those voters in Midtown and in St. Petersburg. I'm going to do my level best to serve you well and be the best senator that this district's ever seen.
I know you'll work hard because I've watched you in the past, without a doubt. The question I get that I'm seeing nationally, and I'd like to get just a quick thought from you on it, is that there's a whole lot of people that are really upset that Donald J. Trump will be our next president. And by the time this shows, will be our president. And I watched when President Obama came into office, Mitch McConnell say our primary goal is to deprive this president of anything, period. And I'm beginning to see that same thing. Is it important we all work together, even if we don't like the other side?
It's very important that we all work together, even if we disagree and don't like the other side. It's hard, though, when you have an individual who does not give the dignity to the office that the office deserves, the type of decorum that the President of the United States of America, a world leader, should command on a world stage. The good news is that Donald Trump's not in control. There's a divine order, and it controls. We just have to keep showing up, pushing for unity, pushing for a principled approach to health care, to criminal justice reform, to economic development, to our education needs, and never give up for what we believe is right.
Well, you almost paraphrased Winston Churchill on that. And with that, I'm going to have to thank you for being on the show. I really appreciated you coming. You will come back?
I will come back.
That's a promise. Now we got you on tape.
I will come back.
I'm Bill Hodges. This is Spotlight on Government. Senator Rouson, thank you so much for being with us. Good luck. 70 days into your tour, right?
70.
You're unique, you're special, and you're great. Tell yourself so often because you are, you know. We'll see you on the next Spotlight on Government. And I'd really like to do a whole show on criminal justice.
Let's do it.
All right, we'll see you. Thanks for being with us.